Call of Duty versus Battlefield debate has been one that's been raging since the early 2000s. Battlefield's first game, 1942, came out in 2002, while Call of Duty's came out in 2003, and really that set the stage for what would become a gaming rivalry that would span years and years and years. Over 40 games have come out since 2002 between the two series, and honestly, this year could be a real turning point in that rivalry. But a lot of people would probably argue that the two games won't even be competitors this year because they're trying to capture completely different markets, which I actually don't necessarily disagree with, and I think I can see the logic. So the gameplay you're seeing here is me and a couple of my buddies were playing the Resurgence Island thing in Warzone. It's the first time that we'd played Warzone in actually a hot minute. We'd been playing the Battlefield 6 beta pretty religiously. And then a couple of our guys got on and they didn't have the Battlefield 6 beta, so we played COD instead. And actually it kind of reignited a bit of a love for Call of Duty for me. I'd become burnt out with the skins like many people and the stupid UI and mechanics and cheesy stuff. And I just wanted something nitty gritty and realistic. And that's where, you know, Battlefield 6 plugged that hole. But, you know, jumping back into COD for the first time in however long it had been, actually definitely surprised me because I had a lot of fun, and hopefully this gameplay in the background does something to show you why I think this game series may not be as cooked as some people think it is. So yeah, like I said, COD's been increasingly controversial with its skins, the blatant cheating that hasn't really been addressed, and the convoluted AIs, and the big monetization pushes, and all this stuff that just kills that core fan base that are big Call of Duty fans. And I think it's a shame that COD's gone that way. I'm not a fan of that stuff, but I think we also have to remember that the people like you and I, potentially, that want the nitty-gritty realistic warfare with the realistic guns that don't have the crazy skins and all that kind of stuff, maybe isn't the target market that COD are going for anymore. And do I think Battlefield 6 will change that fact? Honestly, I don't think it will. I don't think the two games are going to be competitors this year. I think the core base that Battlefield 6 is going for is the OG Battlefield player. It's the Battlefield player that wants large-scale warfare, and I appreciate the beta hasn't been super like successful on that front, but I think when you look at the bigger picture with the kind of games that Battlefield have been releasing with map sizes and game modes, honestly, Battlefield 6 doesn't look like it's doing anything new. It has some smaller CQB maps. It's going to have some bigger conquest maps, and it's always been that way. It hasn't always been massive all-scale warfare. Just because you've always played the full-scale warfare doesn't mean that it's only ever been full-scale warfare. And I think when Battlefield 6 comes out, I think a lot of people hopefully are going to be pleasantly surprised that those big conquest maps still exist. They just weren't in the beta. I think a lot of people are playing the beta thinking it's still going to be the full game, and you know, it's not. So I mean, hopefully I'm right there. If I'm wrong, then man, the whole narrative of this video might change. But I think they look at what went wrong with 2142 or 2042, sorry. I think they look at what went wrong there, and hopefully have learned from their mistakes, and they can go forward and go like, hey, maybe this isn't terrible for us just to stick to a realistic gameplay narrative. And I think when you look at COD's stats, obviously we can only really look at the Steam stats, so it's not super telling, but I don't think people that are religiously playing Call of Duty have been stolen away by the beta. I don't expect that to change with the full game. I think maybe there'll be a dip for the first day or two, maybe week, when Battlefield 6 comes out, but I don't expect that to have a long-term impact, especially with the release of Black Ops 7 being potentially under a month away from the release of Battlefield 6. The truth of it is, I don't think Call of Duty are trying to retain those players, because the kind of people that are going to jump ship to Battlefield 6 aren't the kind of players that are pumping money into Black Ops 7 right now, or Black Ops 6 right now, and in future Black Ops 7. Too many 6s, too many 7s, I'm all confused. I think the people that COD are going after are your Valorant players, your Fortnite players, the ones that buy the skins, that want the 15, 20, 30 minute Warzone style matches. They're not going after the core multiplayer base. Well, I'm sure that'll still be a factor in Black Ops 7, I don't deny that, but really they want the players that want a few different game mode options, that want either the fast paced of multiplayer or something like Resurgent Island, or they want Warzone, bigger but still 20, 30 minute matches where it's pretty simple, right? Battlefield are going for the core market that want realistic gameplay, want, you know, hyper realistic guns and skins and all that kind of stuff. And this is probably the furthest apart the two games are going to. I could be wrong here as well, that, you know, this Black Ops 7 could come out and it could be a return to form. It could be a return to, like, for me, the COD World War II was one of the biggest highlights of the last 10 years or whatever it is from Call of Duty. I really enjoyed that game, maybe because it was more realistic than what had been around at that time. But I get a lot of people look back at the heyday of Modern Warfare 2 and 3 and Black Ops 1 and 2, and I don't think COD are going for that with their campaign narrative. I'm sure they will, but with the multiplayer and Warzone narratives, I think they're just going to be further and further apart. And I think that's driven by innovation, like most things, right? You look at really when the two games first went head to head, and I think it's fair to say that's probably Bad Company 1 going up against COD 4 Modern Warfare. Both insanely successful games in their own right. I think COD 4 really changed the online gaming landscape. It introduced competitive gaming in a way that we really hadn't seen on the world stage. And I think it introduced all these mechanics that really laid the land for FPS shooters for the next 20 years, potentially. And I think there's a reason why that's lauded as one of the best games to ever release on the 360, and probably one of the best games to release ever. Like, it looked good, the multiplayer was great, the campaign was great, and it was just super successful. And it went up against Bad Company 1, which was in the spotlight at the time because Battlefield was an established series. It had destruction and, you know, beautiful environments and great guns and good gunplay and a good campaign and good multiplayer, but nothing that really could fight Modern Warfare at that point. And I think it was evident when Bad Company 2 came out and it was going up against Black Ops 1. I think you look at that and it's like, okay, they improved on a lot of these complaints that people had from Bad Company 1, and also really just they tried way harder. Like, it was just a more polished and complete game. I think it was still eclipsed by Black Ops 1 at that point, just because of the international media spotlight that Call of Duty had in it. Like, every game they're releasing was a banger. Zombies had just came out, and it was just this game that everyone wanted to play, which is fine, because when Battlefield 3 came out a few years later, that was the one that really got the debate going, I think. And Battlefield 3 launched as this big, massive online multiplayer game, which they'd done before, but maybe not on this scale. It was like triple the size of Call of Duty. It was gorgeous looking. The gameplay was smooth. Like, it just looked like a complete package, and really was the first time that Call of Duty could be dethroned since it first came out. And obviously Call of Duty answered with Modern Warfare 3, which was, I think, on paper, possibly the most successful COD game they've ever had, which is insane. Like, you look at that year and having both of those games to play, man, it was insane. I just, like, it was just incredible for gaming that year. There was probably more games that came out, but I just remember sinking every hour I had spare into those two games because they were just the complete package. Everything you wanted from an FPS shooter could be found in one of those two games. You had planes, you had tanks, you had massive open scale warfare. If you wanted the close quarters, if you wanted the fast paced, you go to Modern Warfare. And why wouldn't you? It was just awesome. And then you look at when Battlefield 4 came out, which I think was a more complete game than Battlefield 3 ever was, which is perhaps a slightly controversial take, but there you go. That went up against... Actually, I think that probably went up against a few games. It obviously initially went up against Black Ops 2, which was, again, an incredible game in its own right. Then went up against Ghosts in that release window, which was a flop by Call of Duty standards. I think was a good enough game in its own right. It just wasn't what we'd expected at that point from that level that we would expect from the Call of Duty teams. And then later went on up against Advanced Warfare, which, man, I think is one of the most slept on COD games. I think it introduced so many mechanics and things that have carried over to the modern Call of Duty games in the right way. I think that was the first game to do the exoskeletons and omni movement and all that kind of stuff. And really just was maybe not in the media spotlight, a real competitor, but was a fair competitor mechanically, if that makes sense. And, you know, obviously since then we've had Battlefield 1, 5, and we've had umpteen Call of Duties, and a lot of them I couldn't name. A lot of them flops, a lot of them well received. The same with Battlefield. You know, Battlefield had 2042 flop, went up against like Vanguard flop. So it's tricky, and I think you look at where Call of Duty's real successes have been in the last 5 to 6, 7 years, it's been Warzone. And I really think Warzone is going to set the stage for the future of Call of Duty. And really, I think Battlefield 6 isn't a competitor because of that reason. Because, yeah, they have their own Warzone, or they have their own Battle Royale, I should say, not Warzone, coming in Firestorm, but it's not where the bread and butter of the game is. Where I think you look at what the bread and butter of what the future of Call of Duty is going to be, I think it's going to be your Warzone, your Battle Royales. It's going to be, yeah, the multiplayer is always going to be a big part of it because that's Call of Duty's identity. But I don't think it's going to be perhaps the level that we've seen it over the last 15 years. Which I think is also tricky because you can't look at the metrics. The metrics aren't readily available. Yeah, you have like SteamDB and you can look at the player counts, but with Game Pass being a huge part of Call of Duty and, you know, EA Access being a huge part of Battlefield, the sale numbers are never going to represent what the game's actually doing. And I think for that reason, you can't compare the two. I really don't. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. I'm pumped for both releases. I'm going to play both of them. You know, Battlefield 6 is going to come out, and I'm going to play the absolute shit out of that. And then Black Ops 7 will come out a month or so later. At which point, I'll probably be bored of Battlefield 6, and I'll play the shit out of that for a little bit. So I'm excited for both. I think both are going to have a great launch year, I hope. And I think it's only going to do good things for the industry. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is this a fair assessment of the current gaming situation? I think so. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.